I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment.
And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The newest show sensation streaming throughout the multiverse. Your hang place in cyberspace for paranormal news and views. Taboo Topics with Gene Broida.
Welcome, everyone, to Taboo Topics with Gene Broida. I'm your host, Gene Broida, also known as Lightworker 111, beaming to you from sea to shining sea, across the Americas and the world, every Sunday night between 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States on my Taboo Topics YouTube channel and at tabootopics.life/shows. On each episode of Taboo Topics with Gene Broida, our panelists share news articles about paranormal events, conspiracies, and other hush-hush subjects to shed light on the darkness coming from the government and mainstream media. The newsbringer gives feedback before inviting discussion from the other panelists. Tonight, I am so proud and thrilled to have as guests on the show Laura Eisenhower, who is a global alchemist, researcher, and intuitive astrologist, and so much more. Also with us, Kuhn, co-host of the awesome podcast, Journey to Truth. Laura, tell us all about yourself. I know the viewers are very keen.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on this show. I'm just really grateful to be here. A little bit about myself. Well, I have been on quite a journey. I know we all have had very interesting journeys in this human experience, but I have just had a lifelong understanding of, I don't know, a calling or some kind of mission related to this particular window that we're in right now. It was almost like I was being prepared since I was a child. And a lot of downloads and information was coming into me. And it was pretty intense because it began to go beyond just the personal soul journey. I mean, there was a lot that got triggered as a young child, just being in the Eisenhower family, just kind of like, okay, how'd that happen? And what does that mean? I definitely was the black sheep, not completely like pushed away at all though. Just more like everybody scratching their head, like not sure what to make of me. Because I've been talking about some pretty out there stuff. But so I've kind of been a lifelong researcher when it comes to topics related to, you know, exopolitics and things that have been hidden from us and held in secrecy related to ufology, particularly focused around things from the Second World War to like now and this transfer of, you know, energy and power that, you know, got darker and more infiltrated in, you know, our American government and the roots of that and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of my focus has really been on alchemy, galactic astrology, medical astrology, you know, understanding of junk DNA, earth grids, and Venus transits, and everything about what this shift is about. So between the two, it's giving me a pretty broad perspective, and it's enabled me to connect a lot of dots. And basically my mission and goal is to help free us from the 3D holographic time loop, the false archonic systems, military industrial complex, and to expose hidden agendas so that, we can take our power back through understanding the different types of assaults and tactics that are used to, socially engineer us, control our minds, and siphon and harvest our life force, and how we can just step away from that and really step into who we really are and what we're made of and what our potential is on a human and cosmic earthly level, because we are made of these things.
Well said. And I must say, I knew you were a kindred spirit. Wasn't quite sure how kindred, but uber kindred. When
Nice.
did you come out as the granddaughter of Ike Eisenhower?
Well, it's great granddaughter. I never really.
Great granddaughter. Thank you for that correction.
Oh yeah. When I started to recognize that I need to expose some dark agendas that I was wrapped up in, not like intentionally, I was recruited to go off planet in 2006, attempted recruitment to go off planet in 2006. And I learned a lot about shadow government stuff, dark technologies, and, timeline wars. It really opened up my further curiosity. I mean, the interest was already there, but I mean, talk about more rabbit holes, because it was sort of life or death when you're in it versus researching it. It's a whole nother world. So in around 2006, I delved a lot deeper, because a lot of terminologies like handler and, going off to Mars and different reasons behind it that connects with certain things that we hear about, with different whistleblowers that have come out with their testimony. As far as the trajectory of the human race in terms of the facades that have been presented to us and what that could lead to, and then the real story behind it all that relates to Black Ops projects and how our tax dollars have been funding things that we're not in awareness of. And how this facade was presented to me was something I had to poke through and reveal and understand for myself to get out of it, but I didn't have a whole lot to go on. So when I finally got a grip on it and got away from all that, because the targeting had to do with a partner that was used to kind of pull me in and convince me this was a good idea to leave the planet in 2012 in the event of cataclysms. My knowledge of weather weaponry and HARP and induced and engineered events that could create this possible scenario, just like the responsibility hit me really hard. And because my mom legally changed my name to Eisenhower when I was 11, but got remarried, so I took my stepdad's last name, something, told me, and I really felt, because Ike has been with me since I was a child, that, don't be afraid to use this name. Now is the time more than ever, because you're using it for a reason that will draw attention to things that have been, not in our awareness. And so nobody in high school really knew I was related to Eisenhower. So it was sort of a big revelation for people that I grew up around. I mean, some people who were closer to me knew, but so I just, I don't know, joined Facebook and social media. I hadn't really done any interviews, and I just decided, I'm ready to share this information. And I've been so close to him my whole life. And I feel like I carry this name for the right reasons, and I'm ready to just take this on. And so it's not the easiest thing. I know it makes people curious about my life path. And so that, I guess, can be helpful, wanting to share a message. But it was really when I first started social media. Then I was like, oh no, I can't revert that. I can't take that back. A lot of attention started coming my way, and I was like, okay. But I just really feel like the door needs to open and a lot needs to be exposed. And I really feel like I'm standing in, a strong mission that is so closely linked to, Eisenhower and our connection, that I felt like I was just given permission from my higher self and even him to, go for it. I was very shy about it before. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but
it's fine. It's fine. I'm enthralled. Aaron Kuhn, tell us all about yourself, sir.
Yeah. So I had my awakening, so to speak, about 8 years ago in 2012. I grew up very religious, very Christian before that, my whole life. And I just kind of hit a point in my life where it wasn't resonating anymore. Like the answers that were supposed to be true and answer everything weren't making sense anymore, you know? And I just started kind of on my own little journey to truth, so to speak, back then. And I just started like digging and going down all kinds of rabbit holes and seeking truth just in general. And one thing led to another. And I found like David Wilcock back then, David Icke, Dolores Cannon, all kinds of people, Project Camelot. That's when I started getting into the weird stuff, you know? And I kind of like, whereas a lot of people would come across that information and kind of like put up a wall and be like, oh, that's crazy, or that's conspiracy fringe, whatever. Since I was kind of just open to everything, I was like, well, this is very interesting to me. It just fascinated me, you know, all the ET stuff and conspiracy stuff. And some of the conspiracy stuff I knew at that point even was true. So I just kind of kept digging, and my mind was just being blown over and over, essentially. And my paradigm was just being shattered, and I was having to I was kind of, my dark night of the soul was happening at the same time, because my whole belief system was being blown apart. So I had to kind of like rebuild myself. And for about 5 years from that point on, I just was kind of isolated here in St. Louis. Just I didn't know anyone else that was into any of this stuff, or, you know, I didn't have anyone else to talk to about it. So I was just doing my own research and watching YouTube videos and watching Gaia just on my own. And then I went to my first conference in 2017, which, Laura, you were actually a speaker at, was called Eclipse of Disclosure in Mount Shasta, California. And that conference was the first time I was able to make friends and connect with people in this community. And it totally like changed my life, basically. And I met Tyler at the next year when it was called Dimensions of Disclosure, and it was in Colorado that year in 2018. That's where I met Tyler. And
that would be Tyler Koala.
Tyler Koala, he's
and you guys do this thing together.
Yeah. We kind of just fell into it too, because I met Tyler and found out he was from St. Louis. So, you know, I was like, yeah, I got a friend here I can talk to, and it's awesome. So we were both just kind of talking and realized we both really wanted to do something, but we didn't really know what. We wanted to channel our like kind of creative energy into some kind of project to help this whole movement, right? To help get this stuff out there. And we decided on a podcast and just kind of like jumped into it. I had no idea what we were doing. And we're like, hey, let's just like message a bunch of people that we like, and maybe we'll have a few people agree to come on as guests, and the rest of the time it'll probably just be us two. That's literally what we expected at the beginning, but we've been blessed that like almost everyone we've asked to come on has agreed to do it. And every week, except for like a couple, we've had a different guest on, as yourself and as you, Laura. Laura was actually one of our early guests in the podcast, and it's just been an amazing journey and ride so far. And we've gotten so much great feedback from it. And just people that, you know, so many people have messaged us saying like, wow, your podcast has opened me up to all this new information that I never thought, you know, I never would have looked into before, because we're having people on from every area of, you know, truth, the overall umbrella of truth, you know. So like UFO ET or spirituality or conspiracy deep state stuff, just kind of any information that we feel like is beneficial to humanity needs to get out there as much as possible to help in this great awakening that's happening.
And it's on Journey to Truth podcast.
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel.
Don't know what we're talking about.
It's called Journey to Truth podcast. Yes, it's a podcast, but we have a YouTube channel that we kind of is kind of the main focus of it. But it's also on iTunes, Spotify, and a bunch of other platforms that you can find.
And it is an awesome show.
Thank you.
And I am your host, Jean Broida. I am a lifelong UFO researcher, as are many of us in the community. I started reading von Däniken when his book was brand new, and J. Allen Hynek after he turned from the government, after the government misinterpreted, mispublicized the conclusions, the scientific conclusions of Project Blue Book. I went to my dad, the uber scientist who had worked on 10 megaton nuclear development, and said, what do you think about this UFO stuff? And he said, the government has no proof of the existence of UFOs. So knowing what I know now, he was either on the inside lying to me to protect me, which seems rather likely at this point, but I don't know for sure, or he was giving the truth as he understood it. In any event, I am not only a lifelong UFO researcher, but a parapsychologist, and I've authored a book. My higher self directed me to start writing books. And my first book is Unknown Objects, the Top 10 US UFO Cases. All of these events are so last millennium. But again, like Laura, I go right back to the beginning in the United States, which appears to be in the 1940s, at least what we know. And it involves her great-grandfather, Ike. I'm an avid news hound. I write daily articles for the Daily Conspiracy and Survival Update and many other publications. And I have a background in computer science. I have a master's in computer science with undergrad degrees in psychology and education. And I practice mysticism. I'm a Wiccan. I read tarot, do astrology. Like many of us in the paranormal disciplines, we're all over the board. A lot of us are multi-talented, and we're blending intellect and empirical research with metaphysics. So physics and metaphysics, it's becoming even more common. And these really are remarkable times where light workers are awakening to these universal truths in numbers never before seen before. And all of us gathered here today on this show hope that you will enjoy all the articles that we bring to you. Perhaps we can bend your minds a little bit with these taboo topics. So let's kick it off. And I'm happy to open with an article that I picked really with Laura in mind. This is one that got published on survivalupdate.com. And this was on November 28th, so right around Thanksgiving last year. And the title is Witnesses Say President Eisenhower Met with ETs. So here we go. Have you heard the one about President I Like Ike Eisenhower meeting with beings from another world shortly after the end of World War II? True story, according to multiple witness testimonies. It all happened in 1955, 10 years after the close of the Second War to end all wars. After peace was declared, a military nuclear arms race sprang up between former allies Russia and the United States. This Cold War competition included the race to space. Eisenhower took office in January 1953. 2 years into his term, on February 9th, 1955, Eisenhower told the press he was going quail hunting in Georgia for a few days. He departed the next day, accompanied by a chartered plane load of journalists from all major networks. The reporters were following the president due to international tensions. The Russians were having a major leadership upheaval after Stalin's death in 1953, which led to a power struggle for leadership won by Nikita Khrushchev. And the Communist People's Republic of China was making aggressive moves toward the Nationalist Republic of China in Formosa, a republic that existed at that time on the island of Taiwan. So Ike and his entourage arrived at Thomasville, Georgia at about 4:30 p.m. on February 10th, and the president did hunt quail for an hour or so and retired to his guest cottage after returning with no game. Within 24 hours, military personnel stationed at Holloman Air Force Base were notified that their commander-in-chief had scheduled a landing there. Eisenhower was off limits to the press for about 36 hours because, according to his press secretary, James Haggerty, the president and his valet were, quote, treating a case of the sniffles, unquote. An ex-airman stationed at the base hospital documented the presidential visit in a 7-page letter he sent to UFO investigator Art Campbell, a 1950s National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, that's NICAP, investigator and chairman of a NICAP chapter in Kansas City, Missouri. The airman stated that Air Force One, the Columbine 3, with Eisenhower aboard, touched down at Holloman around 9:00 a.m. on February 11th. By prior arrangement, the plane taxied and parked on an active runway. Base radios were ordered shut down. Some grumbled about flying blind, while officers instructed their subordinates to carry out business as usual. Witnesses spotted 2 UFOs approaching Holloman. They were round, with no wings or obvious means of propulsion. A third UFO then showed up. One unknown craft landed in front of Air Force One. The second took up a position where it could see both the conventional and the unconventional aircraft and hovered silently. The third UFO hovered over the flight line. Quote, the 2 objects stopped about 300 feet over Air Force One, and one descended on the far side of the plane and gently touched down about 200 feet ahead of the plane. The other hovered briefly and then came across the near runway towards the big hangars and some shop buildings. It took up a position somewhere above the buildings over the tarmac. The disc had a good vantage point of anything that might come towards the president's plane and the disc on the ground, unquote. Now, a man presumed to be the president left the parked plane and walked to the UFO. A ramp extended to the ground and someone was seen shaking hands before entering the flying disc, the person who had walked across the tarmac. Approximately 45 minutes later, Eisenhower, if such that person was, returned to his plane. Eisenhower remained at the base on Air Force One until 4:30 or 5:00 p.m. when his plane left. The airman listed the names of 8 witnesses who saw the UFOs. One witness was Air Force medic and a high-altitude chamber specialist, Manuel Kirkland, who was assigned to Holloman Air Force Base in the spring of 1955. Kirkland has gone on record with detailed eyewitness reports from several sources who all say that President Eisenhower paid an unpublicized visit to Holloman on February 11th, 1955. In February, Kirkland was asked if he wanted to participate in the honor parade that always unfurled for a presidential touchdown. The airman declined and was told to report for duty instead. The event was canceled with no explanation 1 day before Air Force One's arrival. It is very interesting to note that Eisenhower and his advisors had been preparing material, gathering statistics, and reviewing the rationale for continued nuclear testing in the United States. The leader of the most powerful nation on the globe was also considered the custodian for the free world's nuclear arsenal. Kirkland worked in the flight surgeon's office under Dr. Robert Reiner, an Air Force captain. Airman Dorsey Moore was in charge of Kirkland's group, and Moore had driven his wife to the commissary to shop. When they returned, he asked Kirkland, when he got to duty station, "Did you see what's out there on the flight line?" And Kirkland replied, no, he had not, and asked what it was. "It's a disc, a hovering disc," Moore answered. So Kirkland imagined a disc small enough to throw, maybe a foot across. And when he asked Moore, the guy said the disc was made of metal that resembled polished aluminum or steel, and as for the size, 20 to 30 feet. Moore told Kirkland he could see the hovering disc for himself since it had been loitering during the 30-minute commissary trip. Go out to the front of the hospital, he says, and look down at the flight line. You'll see it. Kirkland asked a nurse to ask the supervising doctor for permission to leave his duty station to confirm Moore's sighting. The doctor denied the curious airman's request. Now, Campbell's investigation into this hush-hush incident includes information through guards assigned to the president, the complete flight records, and the 2 additional independent witnesses who gave live videotaped testimony. The credibility of these witnesses supports the claim that the 34th President of the United States had a face-to-face chat with visiting off-worlders. Then why on earth have government agencies spent billions, if not trillions, of taxpayer money over decades to deny the existence of UFOs, discredit anyone who claims the government knows they are real, and distract the public from the truth with derisive propaganda? And as just a continuing thought to this, there was a lot of feedback a lot of comments to this posted article, this published article. And one is from a man named George Capus. He says, I was aware of these meetings over 40 years ago, as apparently Eisenhower had as many as 3. And et cetera, et cetera. Several people replied to this article after it was published saying that, yes, indeed, they had privy information to that. So I ask you, guest panelists, Aaron and Laura, what do you make of all this?
Laura, do you want to go?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. That's really awesome that you have all that information. Yeah, I think, I mean, this is something that took place a long time ago. I mean, when we look at our galactic history, when we look at, you know, just what some sources have said, I think Phil Schneider said 1932 was when ET government relations took place. 1926, Keylontic Science mentions. And when we see how things have changed over the course of time and what happened during the Second World War with paperclip and, you know, this infiltration and a lot of cover-ups with UFO crashes, not just Roswell in the way that it was expressed, but I mean, there were multiple crashes. You know, there's just a lot of pieces, you know, to the story. So by the time his administration came around, what was considered the Greada Treaty was something that I heard was renewed every 10 years. So this was something that was established previous to him. And by the time he stepped into office, it was considered more of a surrender because of things that had happened in Antarctica with, you know, Admiral Byrd, and then, you know, them flying crafts over the Capitol, and a lot of the negotiations that took place that led to, you know, a feeling of, you know, defeat in a lot of ways. And then all of a sudden these, you know, ETs show up, more than one type of contact. And from what I've come to understand, Eisenhower was open to what the Nordics had to say, wanted to disclose things that he wasn't able to disclose because in 1947, some laws were put in place that basically said this was top secret and there was no way that this would be allowed to be shared without, you know, severe ramifications. And so when you look at all the different whistleblower testimony and all these different sort of reports and just the information that you've pulled together, which I've never heard in this kind of way, which is really, really awesome. So I can't wait to hear this again and listen again to what you just shared, to really just, you know, kind of help me to see even more of the picture. I mean, this level of secrecy and even the misinformation, I feel like we're on the brink of, you know, what that means from the more malevolent side and then the benevolent side. And I don't like to like make it dark or light, but it does really come down to service to self or service to others. And what some of these beings wanted was, you know, self-serving to a certain degree until breeding programs actually, I think, help them to reestablish their emotional energies and sensitivities and benevolence. So in a way, we've been helping a dying race just like they presented. But there's another element to it that took advantage of these treaties and didn't honor these treaties and took way more human lives than they said they would. But what I heard in my some of my research that I feel real good about is that the abductions started actually in Roosevelt's administration with Hitler and Crowley. Some alliance happened there, and it just keeps getting renewed, and it just got more and more out of control. These secret space programs went rogue, and the defense departments got infiltrated. And then, we sort of have these misrepresentations of history, thinking we won the Second World War, when really we look around and our skies are being sprayed. We're seeing, some level of attack, the introduction of 5G and all these things that really hit the point home that we didn't really win the war. And there's this whole other element there that has so much testimony connected to it that there's no way it can be denied. And so you bring a lot more clarity, and I just really appreciate that. That's just kind of my 2 cents of what I've come to understand, because here we are, getting more of a grip on why has this stuff been secret. A lot of it has to do with, breeding programs, and also using technology to harvest energies in order to generate artificial timelines. And how propaganda and things like Project Mockingbird have really, been focused in on steering the narrative through, the power and energy that we give, these different, possibilities, and how we got to bring that attention back to ourselves. I think a lot of attention is put on Eisenhower when it comes to extraterrestrial contact. And I feel like there's a lot more disclosures, connected to that, but this was a very critical administration because of, I think there was probably more going on with all that than any other administration, because of the shift from the Second World War, from him being general to president. He seemed to be a great person to sort of pull in and create a scapegoat out of. It's a big, tangled thing that I'm still trying to process and come to terms with. It's not the kind of thing that I feel like I'll ever have, answers to. And so, other people researching this and sharing information really helps, because I love to share the information, and then hopefully people can discern for themselves what they think. But also, one has to consider that there were units of the NSA that played a hand in, how these things would unfold. I mean, we really have been dealing with a lot of the, where to put the pieces, where to put the chess pieces. And when you're dealing with, advanced technologies like looking glass technologies and quantum access technologies that can, see into the past and into the future and manipulate the human race based on the cycles of probability of where we're going to, end up in our level of consciousness after a certain point. I think this all is a part of helping and hindering. And it's really the crux of a galactic duality and war that we have to come to terms with within ourselves, because ultimately we're either, the prize for some, or the sovereign beings that can work with the more benevolent groups that really want to see us to thrive and learn again what we're truly made of. And there are some that just want to use us as a battery or as a source to begin to heal, and having that discernment between what is behind wanting to keep the darkness alive, and who are the ones that are really struggling, wanting to break free of those wars, from, the Orion Empire, the Orion Wars, and where a lot of modified beings, engineered, like the tall whites and, other forms of grays, have been used. So there's that struggle that we have as humans, and I believe extraterrestrials as well, or what we would call ETs, of those that really want to heal and get themselves back, and those that have become so automated, almost to the point where, they're not even, they're soulless, or they've been created, like military, reverse engineering, or figuring out a way to create a military scenario that seems like an abduction, that confuses people between what is actually a legitimate contact experience versus something that is absolutely and totally operated by military forces and the military industrial complex component. And it's just so to bring more reality like you have to these sort of stories is going to help humans prepare for what's to come in this window period, because it's not going to be just us in this 3D anymore. We're going to be more and more exposed to our galactic heritage and things that have been manipulating us and trying to steer this ship of what our future can possibly be. And the more educated we are, the more we'll be able to handle these things, and people better get up to speed because things are moving real quick.
Well, you raised so many points, but we all want to hear from Aaron. What do you think? Eisenhower, tarmac meeting, ETs, what do you think?
Yeah, I 100% believe it. I mean, I've read about that. I've heard about that. You went into very good detail there, and there's a lot of details there I hadn't heard before, so that was very interesting. But yeah, I mean, this is much bigger than Eisenhower, as Laura said. You know, he kind of came into it, you know, and it was like this thing that was already going on, and like she said, he got used as like a scapegoat almost, like, oh, it's his fault. He made this deal. It's like, no, it's not. It's a much bigger thing going on here. So, um, you know, I've done a lot of research, and you know, kind of the overall picture of what I've gathered, at least like on the 3D level of what's been going on, is you've got, we call them, you know, the cabal, the Illuminati, the deep state, the globalists, New World Order, whatever you want to call it, whatever name. And there's multiple factions. It's not just one. A lot of people have this misunderstanding, like it's just one cohesive entity. It's not really. It's a bunch of factions that kind of all have the same goal, but they're still like separate, you know. That's where you have like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and whatever. But they've been behind the scenes on this planet manipulating things for a long time, and you know, there's the negative ETs above them that are using them for their agenda ultimately. And you know, the deeper down the rabbit hole you go, the more crazy it sounds and it gets. But there's a lot to back up the veracity of all that. But anyways, so these negative, you know, entities have basically been kind of like, for a long time, I feel like using people and groups on the planet as like proxies for their agenda. So they kind of like, that's why you hear like the Nazis kind of got teamed up with the reptilians, if you've looked into that information, because they were a match to their frequency and they're kind of like what they wanted to do, like domination, world domination and control and everything. And so, you know, obviously that was World War II, and you had the CIA created at that time, as it wasn't meant to be what it's become. You know, it was meant to be intelligence for the war, basically, and then it kind of like spiraled out of control and went crazy. And you know, you had Project Paperclip, as Laura mentioned, and a lot of these people, these Nazis, and they came over and infiltrated over here, and without the knowledge of almost everyone, and you know, they all have these agendas that are only serving themselves and at the detriment of everyone else. And so yeah, Eisenhower kind of like, you know, he kind of walked into a big mess that he had no idea, and once he found out about it, he was like, whoa, he kind of flipped out. And that's why you see when he tried to gain access to, what was it, what was going on in Area 51, I believe, and they denied him. They said, like, it's above you, basically, and he was like, how could it possibly, I'm the president, how could it be above me? What are you talking about? And he kind of flipped out about it, and he said he would send the First Army from Colorado to invade and everything. And that was kind of when he was discovering like the craziness of what he walked into and what's actually been going on. And it's, you know, it's kind of like it's this deep dark thing that's been plaguing the planet for so long. And it's like when you look at history and you see, when you know about this, you can see like Eisenhower and JFK and all these people that so much of what they did and said suddenly makes sense because they were trying to fight this, and you know, they either get killed or silenced, or you know, it's this thing that's been going on. So now what we're seeing is we're coming to the end of all that. All that stuff is all of the dark hidden stuff is being exposed, is being brought to the surface right now. And even like astrologically, you can look and it's lining up with all that. You know, we're at the end of a cycle right now. So the old structures are falling apart. There's a lot of chaos because you've got the old fighting to stay here and fighting tooth and nail, and then you've got the new coming in and pushing everything up to the surface to be exposed and to be cleared, and the new world to be brought in, you know, that is serving everyone on the planet, not just a tiny minority of people that want to dominate and control everyone. So but yeah, it's fascinating though, like learning the history like that of like Eisenhower, and I do believe he was a benevolent soul that truly wanted the best, but he, you know, there's only so much you can do, unfortunately. And a lot of people think the president has like ultimate power to basically to like do pretty much what, you know, not whatever they want, but like they think it's like the highest level. But when you do your research, you realize the way the structure's been set up is the president doesn't really have a lot of power. They're just kind of like the public thing to, you know, to be put out there. And it's really like, so like with Trump, it's not really Trump that has the power. It's the people backing him up, really. And that you might hear people talk about the alliance or the white hats. They're the good guys in the military industrial complex that have been fighting this deep, dark cabal that's been infiltrated everything for a long time. And they've been working to free humanity, essentially, ultimately. And we're kind of now seeing they're finally like winning now. And you know, I don't like to get political, but you know, when you do your research and you realize what's going on, you know, that's what I found is that Trump was kind of like they came to him and asked if he would kind of step up to work with them and fighting these people and bringing forth these hidden technologies and all this stuff and dismantling their systems and the sex trafficking and drug trafficking and all the stuff that's supporting this system that's enslaving and draining the planet, you know.
I just have to wonder, as an historian and storyteller, what went on in that plane, on that tarmac that day.
Yeah.
Who was aboard? What were they talking about? Laura had mentioned the Grenada Treaty, and I had not heard that it was renewable every 10 years. But for viewers who may not be familiar with this document, it was basically a contract between ETs and humans to share some resources, and the humans would provide space for repairs on craft and bases basically on Earth, and recreational facilities, for lack of a better term. And in exchange, the ETs got biological sampling first and foremost, and I don't know what else. I don't know all the particulars of this treaty. I'd love to know more about it. But if I could have been a fly on the wall inside that plane, inside that UFO, that would have, these are things we'll probably never, ever, ever know. And as a person who wants to know everything, it makes me crazy.
Yeah.
To know that I'll probably never know.
Yeah.
So listen, we could talk about this all night, but I want to hear Laura's article. How about you guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you viewers out there, I know you're out there. We all want to hear.
Okay. Well, it doesn't really have a name, but I'm just going to go for it. Well, I mean, it has a lot to do with this, you know, particular Ascension window and really addressing just kind of larger picture stuff and sort of what we're dealing with. I don't know how much time I have on this.
And is this something that you wrote?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, this is a 2-hour show, but I have been given permission to run long if all of us have the time.
I definitely do.
I definitely do.
I think this is probably pretty much close to the length that you had.
How about you, Aaron? You got somewhere to go?
No, well, I got work.
Yeah, well,
10. So I got plenty of time.
Just take your time, Laura.
Okay,
do
awesome.
Your thing.
Okay, so this is written in my, you know, own words, but some of the research and concepts are inspired from energeticsynthesis.com, Lisa Renee, my research in chelantic science, whistleblower testimony, life experience, mostly because it gave me the inkling to just, you know, start to pull in information that can validate some of the things that were coming in. So just wanted to give, since it's not on the screen, a little bit of a bibliography of some of my sources of information. So, okay. I think I wrote this maybe 2 years ago. So it's not a question about whether or not ascension is happening. It's encoded in DNA, nature, and planetary alignments and aspects. So of course it's happening. The quality of silver gold frequency is being transmitted to our sun and planetary body for the first time. This is very much the alchemy that comes with polarity integration. It represents masculine and feminine, rod and staff, and electric and magnetic forces coming together and merging. And after war, infiltration, and exploded planets and cataclysms in our Earth and galactic history, it made it very difficult for their organic expression to exist in this lower density. So these frequencies coming in right now are healing the Earth grids, and it's correcting reversals. And this is dismantling dark technology. Our DNA is a replica of this. Our process of DNA upgrades is in alignment with this. It is also the sun and moon rising above the Saturn matrix into a higher form of Saturn and expression. So we're moving into self-mastery in this time of Pluto-Saturn conjunction. So that's more up to date with where we are now. Only we can take the initiative to flow with these cosmic and earthly events. So 5G represents the electromagnetic radiation, but 5D ascension and beyond is the electromagnetic signals we create and attract. Currently, humanity is being accelerated into expanded ranges of electromagnetic frequency exposure. These are either organic or and support biological ascension, or they're artificial and they block and disrupt the flow of energy in our physical bodies. And this creates pain, it creates depression, and it puts us in a lower vibratory energetic that is easily, you know, fed upon. And that's what the nature of, you know, these control agendas seek, you know, to do. And it affects our DNA. Our DNA and its nucleic acids hold the elements that become polluted and damaged in the same way we see outside of ourselves. So the relationship between what's going on within ourselves and what we see outside of us is very incredibly linked. The nervous system of humans produces an alternating magnetic field, which is capable of extracting ions from the atmosphere when there's a vibrational match to the same frequency. So it really comes down to our consciousness and our capacity to get frequency downloads that are authentic and not from imposters. Chemtrails and 5G pose threats, but only if you buy into the programmings. And that is why TV and propaganda and mind control are the means to which we lose our connection to our own divine power and creative spiritual freedom. When we exist beyond the programming, they don't have as much impact on us, but it becomes a constant challenge we have to remain diligent about. So like in every day and every moment, we have a choice to link up with signals that are going to rob us of our creative freedom, or we're going to link to our own divine instructions in connection with nature and cosmos and universal and cosmic natural laws that will help us to become the fullness of all that we are truly made of. The question about our future is really about asking, are we aligned with cosmic and natural law and things like truth, love, and wisdom? Are we able to understand what our life experience is trying to show us and awaken us to so that we can step into alignment? Well, if we pay attention to our life experience, life actually gives us everything we need to ascend. Life is the ultimate teacher. Question is, do we know how to interpret it in a way that serves our growth and ability to transform and embody our authenticity? When there's a lot of interfering signals, it's very easy to lose ourselves to something that actually doesn't need to exist. And the artificial component relates a lot to Saturn and the rings of Saturn. Every chart is a roadmap towards liberation, ebbing and flowing between the negative and positive until it loses its charge and we stop perceiving things through the lens of duality, which keeps us divided within ourselves and each other. When we perceive from a place of integration, we are constantly conceiving new realities based on our own instructions, visions, dreams. And it's the conception that happens with polarity integration. It's constantly birthing, it's constantly creating. So everything that we are going through in duality, we're learning to bring into unification. And that's the most important thing right now. And that's, the premise of the masculine and feminine, being in balance and embracing our own inner light and dark. Because without that integration, there's no conception and we're stagnating. And when we're stagnating, we're not grounded in our bodies, or we're not moving forward. And it's very easy for other energies to get in our space and, end up, taking control. So the agenda, the dark agendas that we're seeing on the planet had a very long time to plan for this awakening that we're currently in right now. These predatory forces possess free will and have their own agenda, which is to expand their power base and sustain themselves by feeding upon humanity's emotional energies, as well as keeping anyone from becoming aware enough to add destabilizing influences to the spiritual prison farm they are running here on Earth. They require emotional, etheric, and vital energy to sustain themselves. And we've been their primary food source. They feed upon energies that are in resonance with their own lower embodiments, negative emotions, psychological suffering, and perversions. So the time matrix is actually an energy distribution system which carries life force energy from source into the dimensional layers of which the soul matrix is a part of. Because we've dealt with planetary explosions and these cataclysms, we've been sort of blown out of the grid of the soul matrix of these previous planets, which directly connects it to the time matrix and the perpetual energy supply. Its energy and its evolutionary potentials become limited or bound when there's fragmentation in this level of trauma. And that is, what the whole idea of like continual world wars and, trauma-based mind control is based in, is that you can easily possess a person that's fragmented and traumatized. And so the limits and bounds are very much what the planet Saturn has represented. It used to be a sun, but it's become like the lead of our human experience. The way the planet Saturn has changed over time represents this. When the system falls into digression, the system has no way to replenish itself when it's fragmented and traumatized. The exiting energy is then recycling within the system, but will eventually become negated because the continual recycling depletes it. It is similar what happens through cloning and the use of technologies without spiritual development being focused on. The spiritual development or the spiritual connection, is a regenerative energy connected to the regenerative power of nature. And it continually resupplies us. And, when we look at ascended mastery or even the whole concept of immortality, it's being, in connection with this. When we're not in possession of ourselves, when we're, dealing with trauma that is not being addressed and it's not being recognized in our society and it's being medicated with pharmaceuticals, we're not really operating our system anymore. So artificial intelligence systems have been designed and weaponized, specialized for emotional and ultimately spiritual harassment. In that sense, the emotional and spiritual energy must be lowered to the level that a machine can entrain, follow, mimic, match, record, modify, and replicate that energetic blueprint. If our consciousness is above this and not in the programming, we aren't as impacted. Once a person becomes addicted to the bait of the addiction matrix, that is presented in all forms of manipulation and deception, the architecture of this control system hooks you in and takes your vital force. This is what feeds the technologies and these beings, and it goes off planet as well. Our free energy has been used as a weapon against us. Different false archetypes are played out and they're rewarded and encouraged in our society. Disclosure is coming from us and our job to recover from all the assaults, social engineering, and thousands of years of trauma. Healing our damaged DNA is actually healing thousands of years of imbalance that has turned into health issues and conditions and even genetic damage based in wars that have been fought with our ancestors, belief systems that they might have adopted that ended up being handed down to us as genetic damage because it wasn't in alignment with natural cosmic laws or the person's authentic true connection with source. If we can create balance and harmony and understand our inner self, the elements we are made of, and the ether that's now available to us, which purifies, will heal our damaged DNA. The sun started to move through the 13th sign in 2010, and it's the one zodiac sign connected to the ether. And so we're capable now of healing damage that we are told by medical industries that are impossible, disorders and things that we're told are impossible to heal. Each strand of DNA is composed of 12 base magnetic Mayan female codes and 12 base electrical Dion male acceleration codes, like a replica of the Earth grids. They have been split apart, and the imbalance blocks us from accessing the rest of ourselves. It is like the lid of Saturn. It's the veil that we've been existing under. It is the net we need to lift, the programs we need to dissolve. Embracing the true love story and divorcing the imposters and negative belief systems is key, because it's only our attention on those things and how that infects our creative channels that keeps us compromised and looping in this time loop. Mutations in DNA can occur as a natural or unnatural process. The unnatural is our exposure to mind control, weather weaponry, chemicals, artificial intelligence signals, vaccinations, laboratory-made viruses, toxic elements, and ET control groups have been writing DNA sequence coding into the planetary mind in order to evolve their preferred bloodlines while targeting genetic so-called undesirables or light workers who can elevate humans. This is done to block our higher consciousness from coming in. The fifth element, ether, was also put into reversals on the Earth grids. This has been corrected now, and this is why this window period was so prophesized and is so prophesized, and also so targeted with all these potential apocalyptic doom gloom scenarios that are definitely and totally based in a propaganda infection, mind virus sort of thing that we need to be very, very diligent about not allowing into our systems, particularly now that we're dealing with, another, virus. Viruses hit us on multiple levels. Our relationship to our inner spirit and ancestral clearing can reverse it. That is the importance of the inner work. If we look at how society is structured, it doesn't give us the time off that we need to go into the dark night of the soul, to do the inner work that we need to do, and to, pay attention to this stuff. We're just, told to work, work, work. The core energy of this earth is actually a diamond heart, and it was anchored back into the earth only recently. The reason it wasn't anchored into the earth is because of all these different cataclysms, electrical wars, and all these things throughout history that made it impossible for that energy to be anchored in the planet. It's way more powerful than we can imagine. And what we've been dealing with in these reversals is this black cube harvesting tank in the core of Saturn. That is what blood rituals actually feed. Every planet has a shadow side, and we all contend with Saturn no matter what our chart is. But the way to take down satanic forces is to bring love and awareness into our daily lives and refuse the AI mind control that comes from its infiltrating matrix. Saturn rules the law of structure and things related to our physical body. So if our physical vessel is being controlled and the consciousness connected with that is being controlled, this is what we're breaking as we speak with the element ether and the mother energy anchored back in the planet. But because Saturn isn't made good without our willingness to do alchemy, we need to know that our salvation is taking on the task of becoming masters, self-mastery, not controllers, not victims of enslavement. We're either under the rulership of Saturn, we become the controller like Saturn, or we change the energy of Saturn, which is available to us right now. It's the willing to be on the path of mastery, which to me is looking at life like an athlete looks at an obstacle course. Instead of hitting our head against the things that are challenging us, we learn how to leap over it. We learn to gain strength. We learn to push back in the face of things that are trying to push us down, and we get stronger and stronger. This is where we can become the true guide when we take this upon ourselves to view reality through that level of perception. It clears our emotional waters so that we can also connect to lunar forces that aren't dominated, and in this artificial Saturn moon, connection that has been the programming of patriarchy, the victimized feminine and the authority patriarchal masculine that has impacted and wounded, both genders, and the targeting has been on both sides. So the power of our intuition and clear waters of, psychic seeing is our ability to see where that control is keeping us stuck in the underworlds, I guess you could say. So the rings of Saturn, according to David Icke, are a massive broadcast system broadcasting a fake reality. DNA holds all the information we will ever need to build and maintain the human body. Even researchers at Boston University and Harvard Medical School studied that 98% of our DNA that remains unable to be decoded is called trash DNA. So right now we're going through a big global detox. Things might feel really heavy. Lots of wounds are coming to the surface. Difficult news may still present itself. And this is like a healing crisis that occurs when one is detoxing something really toxic, just like we notice if we go on a cleanse on a physical level. But because unity, truth, love, and wisdom are spreading, we have already laid down a foundation for community and camaraderie as we navigate through the madness. We will, continue to witness a massive purging, an alchemical process that changes the substance down to the cellular level. It is all of our elements that are going through this. Waking up for people is very painful. We may feel increased sensitivity to the vibration of pain around us. But after every detox, even though you may feel sicker while you're in it, because it also lights up old issues, when you get to the other side of it, one is very light, transformed, and clear. So the most nutrient-rich energy that one can give themselves is their own personal sun, their own divine essence, the light of spirit that radiates from within, which connects to the core sun within the earth and the grand central sun of the cosmos, which is a gateway going to the 0 point and opening that neutron window to other universes. It generates warmth, vitamins, balance, peace, and vitality. And when one is conscious of it, it draws back any of its life force that has been siphoned away and used against us. This depletion happens when we are in disunity or negativity, which manifests when we are not treating ourselves or one another with kindness and respect, and when we don't stand our ground to vampiric forces. The only true spiritual discipline is paying attention to this. DNA damage is to make this connection challenged. But we all need to tell ourselves is that when we take this challenge on, knowing we can heal it, we will begin to recognize that spirit holds dominion over matter, physical matter. The satanic agenda is to reverse human neurological functioning so that the electrical energy is disrupted and so that we loop in past traumas, though. And so when we're in this detox, we have to be very careful of being about to make a breakthrough and then being dragged back in again. Their agenda is to separate us from the purifying and alchemical properties of ether through targeting nature and the power of the feminine within both genders. The magnetic has been damaged, but is now healing because it connects to the cosmic ether, which is now available. This is undoing thousands of years of genetic damage and reversal codes. In our true history, the true mother's DNA was extracted from Earth and it was replaced with the dark mother, which is an artificial synthetic alien version put into the planetary architecture to mimic the true role of the mother that the mother consciousness plays, who nurtures us and supports us. These reversal energies has created addiction, suffering, and imbalance. And so the dark forces have been in power for many cycles of our human history with a masterful agenda that has been hard to overcome due to amnesia. Our ability to connect with the true mother is recorded in the cells of our mitochondrial DNA, and the patriarchal program impacting both sexes has been passed down generation to generation. This is also revealed in the controlling of the magnetosphere and magnetic field, which makes the electrical disrupted. These are what makes up our DNA, and so the scrambled codes become junk DNA. Now the planetary alignments with Uranus, which represents the electrical, and Pluto, which represents magnetic, are the initiatory energies that are helping us to correct how they've been distorted and pit against each other. So everything is healing on a cosmic and earthly level right now. And ether and water being carried within the plasmic silver gold liquid light energies is showing us that this reunion and integration of polarity is literally turning the lead of Saturn into gold. This is a reunion of true love on a galactic, cosmic, and earthly level. Question is, are we up for it? Our DNA is directly linked with the earth grids that have electric and magnetic ley lines representing the masculine and feminine, just like our bodies. Our DNA is also connected to the elements. Like I said before, the nucleic acids are carriers. The magnetic field of the earth feminine is just like the flow of our energy body circulation. The electric masculine stimulates the nervous system. It has a soul and spark interplay. It has a soul and spark spirit interplay. The electromagnetic spectrum opens us up to the full field of available energy. The impact the dark technologies have had on the grids has a direct impact on us. It creates digression and has blocked us from the ether, which is now available. The dodecahedron is the platonic solid connected with the ether, which turns inversions and reversals around. There are stargates on the planet that connect with our chakra system, and so we are in a co-creative process, and the grids are a replica of our DNA that is upgrading. 12 strands connecting to the 13th gate neutron window, Andromeda and Milky Way is one again, activating the infinity spiral in our energy bodies. And this is what facilitates our movement from carbon-based to crystalline. And the 13th gate is the core sun of the planet that is now activating and running through her planetary grids and opening the stargates as we are beginning to expand and do the same. And the thing is, if we resist that, if we refuse it, our bodies are going to retaliate even more. If we accept it, we're going to notice healing in ways that we never thought possible, even on a genetic level, and things that we've inherited. The planetary chakra system are also stargates. This reminds me of how we're truly connected with nature and cosmos, and that we are also stargates that can direct consciousness through the earth circuitry and beyond. This is how we do repair work. Electric and magnetic, flow and stimulation and inspiration. Visualize the grids as a geodesic sphere of pentagons and triangles and shapes, sparkling as a faceted, brilliant diamond, the diamond heart of Gaia that switches us on when we connect with it. It is available right here and right now. And the only thing that can get in the way of ascension is our refusal to accept our authentic true self and how we are one with all of this. And diversity and oneness. Diversity in harmony, being oneness, is a way that we can appreciate our differences and work to play together like musical instruments instead of beating each other over the head because we don't think the same. This is definitely a personal thing, a personal journey. And when we can step into that authenticity, we'll begin to know what unity consciousness really means, because we'll be representing our true self instead of following a narrative or some sort of manipulator that wants to keep us locked into the same sort of system that we've been trying to break free from. So that's about it.
Wow.
Amazingly said.
That was a lot of ground to cover. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah. That's
Jump in there.
yeah, that's kind of the deep aspect of what's going on is that's the esoteric reality, I feel like, of what's going on. She explained it very well. A lot of that probably goes over a lot of people's heads. Sounds crazy to a lot of people, but you know what? It's true. Like I think that's it from everything I've woken up to and found. That's very accurate. And you know, any one of us though can just look around and see that, like, the reality of the old falling away and the new rising, and this chaos that's happening from that, so we're seeing the 3D play out in front of all of our faces. And that was pretty much that's like the underlying energetic causes of why we're seeing what we're seeing play out. So the important thing, like she said, is just to flow through it, flow with it, and don't resist it, because it's happening whether we like it or not. So if we're resisting, we're gonna suffer basically, and it's gonna be painful. We can either get drugged kicking and screaming into these new energies, or we can flow into it gracefully, and it can be a beautiful and amazing process. So that's pretty much it.
So other astrologers are talking about what's going on astronomically, and if I catch your drift, Laura, what you're talking about, at least in part, is a recurrence of a conjunction that happens every so often, not very often, but of Pluto and I want to say Saturn, that they're conjunct now. And if that's true, how does Uranus figure into that?
Uranus has been, it moved into an earth sign, Taurus. And around the time of the conjunction peaking, it was forming harmonious aspects with Jupiter. And it was during the eclipse window. And so even though the Pluto-Saturn conjunction happens, it happens like every 44 years or so, this particular configuration with these other, planets in the eclipse, and it being the South Node, Capricorn being the South Node, which represents us releasing ourselves from the dark cycles of history, the Jupiter-Uranus has helped us to connect to our higher mind as we've been kind of yanked into the past and into like maybe really, really difficult growth periods. We've been able to at least have a foothold and connection, with the higher mind that, will constantly give us that download or epiphany or realization when we need it most. Just when we think we might be drowning and sinking and going back into the underworld, going through this, because the Saturn, Pluto is really uncomfortable planets working together. The Jupiter, Uranus, being in earth signs, are showing that our higher mind is not just a concept. It's now a grounded thing, and it's moving in, it's integrating into the mix, so that when we complete the sort of dark night of the soul that we're all experiencing on a collective level to remove ourselves from the old paradigm, it's that inspiration, it's that light that we can see that helps drive us forward. And so eventually Uranus is going to begin to make a challenging aspect with Saturn. So once, when that happens, it's like the wrecking ball. So whatever pieces still remain where we're hanging on, it's going to help us to remove ourselves from, because Uranus doesn't give a crap if we're comfortable in the awakening process. Because it's like, sorry, we're just going to do this and we're going to do it now. It's not like, well, okay, we'll take a nice time of day. It's like, that's why it's also the planet of breakdowns, nervous breakdowns, panic attacks, because it's a really high vibrational electrical energy. So if we've been holding on to attachments and we're getting majorly hit by Uranus, the ascension symptoms are so extreme because, and so many people don't know how to let go of the old paradigm, because it's become just a way of life where a lot of us have been rebels and we've been questioning it from day one. So it's like, yeah, finally. For others, like, so Uranus is definitely, it's the great liberator, but it's really, really intense, and it can create a lot of nervous system distress. It's actually, in medical astrology, it rules all the neurological issues that a person can have, because it's like the higher messages are trying to come in, and the body is just holding on to too much density. And so the friction can create a lot of neurological issues that can be healed.
And so for people who aren't astrology buffs, in astrology, the angular relationship between two so-called planets, and in this case, actual planets, Uranus and Saturn, or any of these, Uranus, Saturn, Pluto, they make angular relationships to each other as they go around the theoretical wheel, which is really an ellipse. So because Uranus, from the point of view of Earth, moves somewhat faster than Neptune and Pluto, but slower than Saturn, these two in relationship to each other, if it's a 60-degree or 120-degree angle, that's thought to be beneficial in astrology. And so you talked about Uranus moving from, if I heard you right, you say Uranus moving from a beneficial, so either a sextile 60 degrees or a trine 120, to a malefic angle, that would be a right angle 90 degrees, or an opposition at 180. Is that, did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's kind of down the pike, but anything that is a squared aspect that would be considered a hard aspect. Yes. It just means that we can't get away with not addressing it. And if we don't address it from our higher mind or from the right places, the society is really built on taking advantage of these initiations. And so if something difficult is happening, we're presented with a choice. Are we going to give our power away, go on pharmaceuticals because we're losing our mind? Or are we going to just really look at why these energies are in friction and find a way? It's like being a tuner of an instrument. It's like, okay, that's not playing in tune. So it presented itself this way. But if we address it, then we can tune it. Whereas the more beneficial energies would be like, oh, they're already in tune. We didn't even have to put much effort into it. It's just there. So, challenge is not a problem. If we can begin to leverage adversity and have it become our friend and allow it to nudge us into a great awakening, then we're not going to be in this duality of feeling defeat, success, failure, and back and forth, or feeling like we're making a lot of progress and feeling like we're back at square one and like we've spiritually failed. There's really no such thing. So even though, there are going to be hard aspects and some of them are just unavoidable, it's nice to be prepared. Like some of them can just kick a person's butt and make them think they're going crazy. But when you say, oh, well, Mars is square Uranus or something like that, it's like, it takes some of the pressure off. It's like, okay, well, we're all dealing with this stuff.
Yeah,
so
that explains that, right?
Right.
But there was one thing you said I was just so curious about. I have to interrupt. You talked about how, if I heard you right, Uranus represents change, which is an astrological given, basically. And Saturn is the timekeeper, restriction and discipline, things like that. You talked about, if I heard you right, Saturn's energy going to golden. What was that about?
It's the alchemy, like the lead into gold.
Yeah, what's this about? Tell us about this alchemy. I've not heard it used in this context with astrology. Fascinating.
Pluto's the planet of death, rebirth, alchemy, transformation. Saturn is about the law of structure, has to do with, time, like you said, and control, and also energy blocks when it's making difficult, hard aspects. When we look at that in our lives, and it helps to know the chart, but not everybody needs the chart, to see where the blocks are, where, what part of our chakra system they're impacting, what elemental they're impacting, and whether that's, coming from childhood or some sort of out of authority, because basically it rules conditioning, outer conditioning. So we've had very corrupt authority. That's why Saturn has harmed us so much, because a lot of the authority that we've been exposed to has not really been a great sort of guide. It's been repressive, it's been controlling, it's been abusive, and even neglectful. It's very hard to find a lot of positive Saturn energy, but a lot of people do carry it in their charts and have had a better relationship with authority. But sometimes it means that they're complacent and they'll never want to look into the bigger picture stuff. They'll just be the practical ones that think people like me or, are woo woo, or all this conspiracy stuff is crazy. They're very comfortable in their Saturn. So it's very important to have Uranus come in and kind of blow a person open so they can reset the structure. So with Pluto next to Saturn, basically what it's doing is giving us an opportunity to reset our relationship with structure. So if we're raised under like religion or rules that have been repressive, that have caused energy blocks or even illnesses that we don't realize are stemming from that, and we go through this sort of underworld kind of dark night of the soul to really just be able to step back and take a break from life to look at that and say, why am I doing a job I don't like? Why am I stuck in a toxic relationship? Why am I still feeling religious guilt because of my Catholic upbringing if I'm not even going to church anymore. You know, it's these things that we don't even recognize are still running the show in a lot of ways. So when we have an opportunity to kind of go into the death zone, it can feel very scary for people. I have my son next to Pluto, so I'm really used to the underworld, but I'm really freaking tired of it. I'm like, still, sorry. But going into that dark place, I mean, the only way to get out of the Pluto death is to find the crone, to find the light of wisdom. And that helps us to come back to the surface, realizing that sometimes we have to stand alone. Sometimes we're not going to have a helping hand. Sometimes we might even feel source, God, or whatever we want to call it, has abandoned us. Or we're just like left here on the planet like E.T. But when we find that inner wisdom and we're able to rise again, this is what's happening on a collective level. We're going through a death. When it's been prophesized that these are the end times, it's the end of the matrix control, really. Because this is what the alignments show, is that is dying. The question is, are we dying with it? Are we resisting it so much that it's making us sick? Are we resisting it so much that we look at the new sort of hijacking of Ascension and we give our power to that and we end up being, you know, dragged off into an artificial timeline? But the opportunity right now is to allow the matrix programs, ancestral patterns, and false authority and damaging authority to be released from us so that we can rise and be in the law of structure that is like a structure that we decide that helps us to thrive. It might be doing yoga. It might be changing our diet. It might be getting exercise every morning. It's discipline and structure that actually can help us to thrive and overcome the disciplines and structures that have been abusive, that have been compromised and have been corrupt. So we're moving from false authority and the false step parent or false partner. We're divorcing the imposters and we're stepping into the authentic, true love story that Saturn becomes good. Saturn turns to gold when it has to do with loyalty and commitment and integrity. When we commit to like a partner or we commit to something and we work with that in a way that really serves something beautiful, then Saturn becomes a beautiful thing. And it's no longer the dark controller. But if we don't do that within ourselves, if we don't win this war within ourselves, we're just going to be yanked by the external forces that are just wanting us to stay conquered and divided and totally out of balance.
Awesome.
Amen.
What do you,
yes.
feedback, Aaron? How much of that is seeing you?
That was just, I mean, she nailed it right there. I mean, beautifully said. And that's the thing I've been thinking about a lot lately too, is like self-sovereignty is what we need to come back to, right? And that's what you kind of see coming back to. It's like people are tired, people are fed up with all these systems telling us what to do, what to say, what to think, you know, trying to control us. And it's people are just like, no. I mean, you look at like, you know, the Yellow Vest movement, like they're like, it's you know, one little thing you can look at that's showing people are just fed up with these structures and like these outside authorities just telling them what to do, what to believe, what to say, what to think.
Well, what about you yourself, Aaron? Do you feel these celestial influences, these astrological poles? Are you feeling heightened?
Yeah.
Because these are outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. I still count Pluto as a planet. Color me old fashioned.
Yeah. It's a
But
planet.
are you feeling these social tidal forces, which is what all these outer planets tend to represent? And these for conjunctions of the outer planets are thought to be generational because they do take 20, 30, 40 or more years to line up that way. So are you personally feeling challenged, uplifted, stymied, despair, hope?
Yeah.
All of the above.
All of the above. And
depends on the day of the week.
Yeah, and I when I look back, like I said, when I had my awakening 8 years ago, I feel like I didn't know that's why, you know, I was feeling that way, but I feel like this all ties into why I had that awakening, why I had, like, I was just tired of, like, going along with this belief system that I had my whole life and going along with all these outside, whatever they may be, people, things outside of me telling me what reality is, what I should believe, what's true, what's not true. And like your self-worth comes from, you know, all these outside things, like whether you're married or you're successful or whatever, and it just kind of drove me inward. And you know, it's like I was just like, I'm so tired of all this stuff. Like, and it was almost like I realized I hadn't really found myself because my identity was too much wrapped up into all these external things. So I just kind of went on an inward journey to find truth in myself and what is, just meaning. and I feel like that's what so many people are waking up to right now, and that's what you kind of see. Like, it's an inward journey that is going to take you to freedom and to truth. It's not, you're not gonna, there's not going to be some like savior or external authority save everyone and come out and say, hey, look, this is what you all should believe, and now we're all going to be happy and everything's going to be great. It's like, it doesn't work that way. That's completely backwards. But that's the programming that the systems have been trying to impose on us for so long. Like, just trust us, we have all the answers, we will take care of you. It only works when you stay at a level of unconsciousness and of you can't be a whole healed healthy person really staying in that. So I feel like right now, I'm totally feeling it. The energies are intense right now. I've been processing, all of that for a while, but it's getting more intense all the time. And but the more you allow that to bring everything under the surface to be healed and to heal yourself and align with these energies, then it starts getting amazing, because then you're suddenly living as a healed being, and you're able to live from like your true self, and you can express yourself the way you want to. You can you don't have to keep following along with things that you don't agree with, and that you can live in your self-sovereignty. It's like we're each our own authorities. There's no such thing as external authority. It's a myth. It doesn't exist. It's a lie that's been given to us, that we've bought into. But now people are waking up to that, I think, and I've woken up to that. And we each have to find what resonates with ourselves, right? No one can like give that to us. We have to come to that. And yeah.
Well said, indeed. And Laura, I just want to commend you on the breadth and span of that article. It was certainly comprehensive. I will go back and listen to this broadcast and pause it occasionally and go over to the internet and do sidebars. Okay, what was this reference and what was that? That was awesome. Thanks so much.
Oh yeah.
There were a lot of dots connected there.
Yeah, I have to remind myself constantly. It's so easy to, the energies lately, I don't know. Just when you think you have a grip, it's like, whew, not quite there.
Something else happens. There's that old Uranus, that old prankster.
There it is.
Something new and different and shiny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No matter how, there's always a flip side to what feels like the greatest struggle. There's always the other side of the coin that, if it's dark and uncomfortable, the alchemy and transformation hasn't completed itself yet. A lot of people get stuck in the mix though, and they think that's all there is, and then they lose hope and they feel defeated. But it's only a temporary, thing, and it's part of the process of shift and transformation. It's not always comfortable.
Well, when I was younger, we talked a lot about, in the psychedelic 60s, we talked about following your heart song. And Native Americans talk about this all the time too. Lots of people around the world talk about being true to yourself. Heck, Steve Jobs talked about it. You've got to, lots of people who are successful in what they do talk about embrace your passions, because otherwise you're a slave to trading time for money, quite often, a wage slave. And if the shoe fits, wear it. I have a day job, but a lot of us are also striving to have the higher octave, to have reality as we know it, and then bring in this higher octave where some of our activities at least are taking us toward ascension, toward this communion with higher consciousnesses, including our own, including human consciousnesses, gaining frequencies. It's fascinating, really. And people who never had any interest in the past are all of a sudden they're
Yeah.
watching the shows, they're tuning in, they're turning on. It's just, it's frankly miraculous from where I'm sitting. So that
Yeah.
was awesome.
Yeah.
Aaron, thrill us with your article, dude. Spotlight on you.
Yeah, so wait, so am I supposed to have an article prepared?
Yeah.
Oh,
Did
my
you miss
bad.
the memo?
I must have missed that part. Sorry.
Do you write stuff?
I'm working on a book, actually, my own book right now, but it's very early on. I'm very not much to it yet, but I'm working on it. But I do not have that handy currently. But I mean, I can.
Story. Tell us what you've been up to lately. Something that would interest all of us.
Okay.
Maybe somebody on your show or some new thing that you got into.
Man, there's so much. That's the thing. Well, let's see. So I mean, really, like the thing that interests me is just like what's, like I said earlier, like what's happening on a global level right now, and like, you know, it's so crazy because getting like the early part of my awakening, I was kind of just taking in a ton of information, right? So it was just like a fire hose like coming in, and I was fascinated, but I didn't like subscribe immediately to any one thing. I just kind of was taking in a lot and like trying to put the pieces together. And the more that came in, and the more I like also listened to myself and my own intuition with things, things were starting to fit, and I was starting to see, okay, this is what's going on. Okay, this is what's going on here. Oh, I'm getting it now. It's making sense, you know, more and more. And it's everything that's happening right now is just like every day. It's just like more and more confirming the reality that this is all real. This is all really happening. Because sometimes you get in this place, at least I do, where I used to, where I'd be like, is this stuff really real, or am I just like believing? Like, is this just like exciting to believe? You kind of start doubting yourself sometimes, and what's like, you know, is okay, I'm pretty sure that, you know, the cabal is real, and they're obviously, that's pretty obvious to me, but like, is there really this ascension happening? Is there really this you know, liberation happening, and this new earth, whatever you want to call it? Are these guys really going away, or are we just being fed these things to kind of pacify us? And that's what you see people say sometimes. But no, it's happening. I mean, everything you see, you know, can confirm that when you look at it. And it's so amazing, because it's like I feel like I've been given the keys to like this amazing reality that like it's like I know what's happening, so I don't, because you see a lot of people get caught up in the fear and like the craziness, and they're like, oh my god, the coronavirus is gonna kill us all, oh my god, or oh this thing, or, you know, oh I hate Trump because the media is putting out all this propaganda, you know. And it's easy to get caught up in the craziness and like everything that happens, and there's so much, you know, it's like every other day is something crazy seems to be coming out. And but when you know what's going on, when you know the bigger picture, and when you've grown, you know, and healed, and you can like not allow these external things happening that get kind of like shoved in our face every day to scare you, and to keep you caught up, like Laura was saying, keep you caught in this cycle, in this system that keeps you trapped in these like lower energies, and kind of keeps us separate from ourselves, like she said as well. It's like we're all coming back to ourselves, and that can be as hard of an experience or as easy as you make it. And you're the only one that can do that. You know, no one can like hand it to you. We have to go through this. It's an individual process. No one's gonna come and like save us. That's the biggest thing that I've been learning. And the latest big thing that's happened would be the coronavirus. And you know, when it first happened, I kind of stood back. I'm like, all right, they're making a big deal out of this. It's like everywhere. You know, there's a lot of crazy stuff being said about this. But I'm not sure. It's hard to know what's real and what's not, you know, when information gets put out there. So, but like the more and more that's come out, it seems very obvious this was a blatant attack on humanity, you know, that it's trying to stifle what the awakening that's happening. You know, it's like this cabal group has been throwing one thing after another because they know it's happening. So all they can do is kind of like throw things out to get us to get caught up in fear again and all these low energies. But it's like they know it's inevitable that it's happening, but they can pretty much just delay it as much as possible because as Laura said, we're like their energy source, we're their food source, you know. We've basically been.
Do you meditate and do yoga, Aaron?
I meditate as much as I can. I probably need to more, but I try to. Yoga, I have not yet, but that's something I've been wanting to get into. Qigong is something I've been interested in. I've been kind of looking into lately, actually, and been thinking about trying to start doing. And but yeah, meditation is huge. Meditation and just kind of like getting away from the craziness of the world for a little bit as much as you can, preferably every day, to kind of like listen to yourself and your soul, basically. And it's so important for your overall health and your well-being. And because, you know, especially the world we live in today, we're bombarded with the news and with jobs and with, you know, everyone has a cell phone now, and we're all like have a screen in front of us all the time if we're not careful, you know. And that can really be very damaging and very detrimental to your soul growth and to getting caught up in, like I said, getting caught up in the fear and the craziness, because, you know, what's being projected on the news 24/7, what's being put out there, and you go on social media, there's always people talking about crazy stuff or drama or whatever. And it's easy to get caught up in that if you're not careful. So the most important thing is to realize you're the only one that can dictate your reality and your own growth. And
yeah,
that's really, it's really that simple. And
I have been meditating and doing yoga all my adult life, basically. What about you, Laura? You into meditation and yoga as a regular practice?
Well, as far as regular, I'm one of those kind of back and forth kind of people.
Yeah.
I really like to be in nature. I like to move my body a lot because I sit a lot during the day. So it's hard to go from, because I used to work outside. I used to landscape, and my background's wilderness expedition stuff, wilderness education. So I'm used to like moving around a lot. Now I'm behind the computer all the time. So when I was moving around all the time during the day, it was easier for me to meditate because I could just, you know, kind of let all the energy settle. Now that I'm behind the computer most of the time, when it's like, oh yeah, I should meditate, I'm like, I just want to leave the house and just move around. And so I try and find a meditative stance, no matter what I'm doing. Like if I'm standing in line somewhere, it's like, how can I find calm? Can I do an activity and go into that zone? Because I know how to do it with my hands. I don't have to give it a whole lot of thought, but I can give myself a mental break and still get stuff done. So I try and be mindful as much as possible. I did some yoga training a while back, and I've had stints where, you know, maybe for a month I'll do it every day. I'm not the most disciplined person, but what was the other one? Meditation, yoga. Yeah. And meditation, I tend to have like downloads, and like, I'm one of those people, like I sit there and I'm like, oh, and then I have to write it down, or something comes in, and it's kind of hard for me to quiet my mind. I try. And then, knowing that like I really am trying to finish these books too, like I have to just say, this isn't you, pulling yourself away. So I have to joke with myself. Like if I wake up and I sleep in, or I have a cat nap, I'm like, oh, I'm meditating. That's good enough for me. When I'm probably just like crashing and being a little lazy. But to me, it's just as much, because I'm in that, I feel bliss. And as long as I feel bliss, to me, that's good enough. And a lot of times it's in between dream state. When I first wake up, when I'm going into that dream state at night, when I'm about to fall asleep, those are my favorite zones. And and during the day, I'll just like shut down and I'll just close my eyes. And I won't say I'm meditating, but after the fact, I'm like, you know what? It's good enough for me. I just meditated.
You made a really good point though, because a lot of people get caught up in this idea of what meditation is, and they think they have to conform to that. Like, oh, I have to sit for an hour completely silent and like just like in the lotus position and like try to think no thoughts or something. And it's like, well, that's one thing you can do, and that can be beneficial, but that's not, I think, like what you said, it's like find bliss, or do something that feeds your soul, is what I would say. Every single day, try to do something every day that feeds your soul, whatever that is for you.
Well, in the strictest sense, the simplest definition of meditation I ever heard, and it works for me at least, just focusing on your breathing. So at any instant, basically, no matter what you're doing, if you're sitting in your car and it's a red light, typically I may be fussing with my phone and eliminating old texts, but just as easily one could be breathing in and focusing on that.
Yeah.
Breathing out. Just focusing on the breath for even a single breath or two is amazing at how it's centering and calming. And Laura, my mind tumbles apparently in similar fashion to yours. I have this monkey mind that's just chattering. And I watch videos on how to calm the monkey mind and do meditation practices, but it's a catch as catch can world.
Yeah.
And I also write health articles. There's a kind of workout that's popular called HIIT, high intensity interval training. And it's where you work out for, basically you start with one part hardcore exercise, aerobic exercise, to 2 parts of rest. And then you work it to where it's 1-to-1 ratio. So if you work out for 20 seconds doing squats or something, jumping jacks, anything very energetic, then you rest for 20 or 40 seconds to get your composure back. And then you do it again, you hit it hard. So now people are doing mini hits, where you're waiting for the toaster pastry to pop up if you eat that sort of thing, or something in the microwave to reheat if you use a microwave, or somebody you're on phone hold, and instead of just sitting there twiddling your thumbs, you get up and you do something aerobic. Even standing leg lifts is better than doing nothing. And I'm finding the more active I can stay throughout the day, even stretching, bending, anything, the better off my life gets. And I'm an advocate for people to be more active physically, mentally. We have all these resources at our disposal, and most people unfortunately are such wage slaves that they're ground down by the end of their day. And I've had people say to me over the years, basically, who cares about UFOs? I want to raise, I want a better life. What does UFOs have to do with my workaday world? And when you start looking at the dots and the connections, you find out, all of us here, I'm sure, are very aware that it's all connected. Why, for example, do we have to work a 40-hour week? What's the thinking there?
Exactly.
Minister Fuller said back in the 60s and 70s, we don't really need a 40-hour work week. Let's figure this out. And nobody listened to that, because the controllers want the 40-hour work week. They want kids in school all the time or in after-school programs. They don't want public assembly anymore in the United States, especially.
Yeah.
Thank goodness there's an internet. And although we hate it, and we hate the NSA snooping on everything, all our communications, this is, in my opinion, the only way we've gotten as far as we have collectively with raising this consciousness. that's my opinion. What do you guys think?
I think every weapon against us can be a tool for our growth. And if we can make it such, then they can't really
Yeah.
mess with us, because ultimately, um, you know, they're in the end shooting themselves in the foot. The one thing they don't want is our awareness. And if we can use all these things that are against us to allow us to expand and become better, then we've turned their weapons into tools of healing. And that's the last thing they want. So it's kind of like beating them at their own game. So, like when I look at chemtrails or I try and now let it remind me of just how powerful we are, and how much these tactics are, targeting that belief about ourselves. And so in order to counteract it, and we step into that, zone, then we're pushing the envelope a little bit. I mean, we have to remind ourselves. It's kind of like if a relationship's targeted, if we feel targeted, what are they targeting? Union, balance, harmony. So therefore, in the face of that, I'm going to be that much more harmonious and that much more careful in that moment that I might want to just react or go into that lower zone. It's like, that's part of the mindfulness of like stopping and taking a breath. It allows us to think in those moments and not just be automatic and unconscious. So I just think everything that they're trying to do to stop us, the more aware we are of their tactics and their agendas, the more we can counteract it, because our consciousness is way more powerful. It's a much higher frequency.
Here. Yes. And if the average person had any idea how powerful we really are, psychically speaking, the whole world would be very, very different. As an historian, as an observer, as a person, in my case, I consider myself to be a star seed, as Dolores Cannon talked about, that I volunteered. I opted in the 1950s to incarnate and do what I'm doing now. And in decades past, I had resisted doing what I'm doing now due to personal issues. And finally, the downloads, the voices, not voices, but the inspiration, I think of it as inspiration, it just became overwhelming. You need to write a book. You need to start doing shows. You need to speak up. And I was getting ill from not speaking up, not following my heart song. And I'm not the only one. I don't claim to be special. There's tons of us out there. Probably everybody on Earth is getting pinged this way, not only from astronomical influences as interpreted in astrology, but as part of this consciousness phenomenon. In other words, consciousness is vibration. Everything is vibration. Our Earth hurtles around a solar system, which hurtles around a galaxy, which hurtles around a universe. All this hurtling is going on. And we're being impinged and bombarded by all these unseen forces, both on our Earth, electricity, magnetism, gravity, but also as our sphere hurtles around and interacts with other ones. I just read an article on Nibiru, some extra planet 9, this extra planet that has to be out there. It's been proven mathematically that something is perturbing, is pulling planets away from their orbits, and it has to be another planet. It hasn't been identified yet. If it hasn't been identified yet, it may well have a very long elliptical orbit. This is speculation, but if it did, that's starting to sound a lot like Nibiru, the planet that the Anunnaki came from. When they landed, their planet apparently made a close enough approach to the Earth system, the Sol system, that they could come to Earth and mine gold and other minerals, which is the topic of my spring presentations, this whole gold mining in South Africa. It's fascinating. There's new archaeological evidence along that line. So depending on how dense our personal consciousnesses are, we may or may not respond to these unseen forces, some more than others. But we're all being bathed in this stuff. And it's interesting to see how people, what Laura was talking about, some people are very happy in their Saturnism, in being in this Saturn discipline and restriction and almost closed-mindedness. about certain things, deniers, whereas other people are now allowing for truth, whereas they had been deniers. It's all very interesting as a shift. Interesting times that we're in.
Yeah.
As for end times, I'm not so sure. I think every generation thinks they're in the end times. What makes you think so, Laura?
But think so about what? That
Did
every
you say that did I hear you right, that at one point you were thinking, saying that end of an age, and perhaps these are the end times as
End of an age, not end of.
Oh, I said end of the Matrix program
Yeah.
control. Like that
Okay,
world is
okay.
dying. We either die with it,
I'm
or
glad I got
we
that.
recognize that we are rebirthing, we are transforming, we are
Mm.
lifting the lid, removing the seals and fences from our DNA, unscrambling the fire codes, and beginning to recognize the junk as treasure that is helping us to recognize that it's really union, and through our own sense of authenticity, and being able to observe our life lessons and be humble and observant enough to gain the lessons that are necessary, or gain the experiences that are necessary. This is what's available, but it means that the old world has to collapse. And so a lot of these dark agendas like to hijack very important junctures in our development by projecting, oh, it's the end times, oh, cataclysm. So all these movies about the end of the world, and the Mayans said it was the end of the world, but it's like, wait a second here. It's really just the beginning. It's the beginning of our awakening to who we really are. But I agree, there's been so many different cycles. We have, memories of cataclysms and the ending of civilizations. We see that just in the world since we were kids, just observing different countries and different natural disasters. When you're in that, when you're seeing, a volcano explosion that's going to wipe, that for that person is the end of the world, the end of their world. But there is never any end. And that's the thing. Nothing's linear. Everything's cyclical. Everything's about cycles. Ascension isn't something like down a timeline. It's a spiraling up. It's a grounding. It's a movement of energy and circulation between the cosmos and Earth that has been blocked by these artificial signals and interferences that we have taken on as programmings that we infect each other with all the time. We don't realize that we're enabling the cabal most of the time. It wouldn't exist if we weren't giving it power. So that world's ending because it's now being exposed, and the criminal activity is being exposed. We're able to now see the crimes against humanity, and we can't be in denial of it. We can't be in denial of it anymore. There's too many people coming forward. And so that's going to begin to spread. And the thing is, I almost feel like there's always something pushing against us. And it's kind of like one or the other. So if we can see something like the coronavirus as almost a metaphor to the mind viruses that we've been spreading to each other by not getting along, by being in a low energy and disunity, we can counteract this when we allow ourselves to say, wait a second, we're being pushed to the edge. It's kind of in a relationship when it's about to make or break. Are we going to break up, or are we going to be together? Right now, we're being pushed to say, are we going to come together as a humanity and put our will together and our psychic power and direct this process and co-create with nature and cosmos? Or are we going to let this stuff, destroy us?
Mm-hmm.
I think each one of us is faced with, that reality check. And we need to rehabilitate together. We need to hold hands and recognize that without doing that, we're incredibly vulnerable. But there's never an end. We've dealt with so many past lives. We've had the end of the world. Anytime we die, that's the end of our world. But on a collective level, the Earth has had, there's been things that have wiped out everything. When we look at dinosaurs, when we look at the way they've been able to track how many end of the worlds there have been, like you're saying. So we have sort of a cataclysmic, like a PTSD response to these things when they show up, because we've been there, done that. But there's never an end. We always wake up somewhere. We never are just obliterated. And God knows how many times the end of the world might have happened in this incarnation, but we just keep jumping a different timeline, or we just keep waking up somewhere else. Who even freaking knows? I like to just go off into those places.
My head's about to explode when you start talking like that.
I don't even.
Yeah.
So we know that you get information downloaded, Laura, and I get information downloaded, or it comes to me. What about you, Aaron? Do you get psychic intuition or information from your oversoul, or however you want to call it, divine inspiration?
I think so, but I don't get like specific information. I don't get like I get more of just like knowings, I guess is the best way I can describe it once in a while. It'll just kind of like hit me that something is true, or something is, this is happening, or I look at this, I need to work on this, or like, yeah, once in a while I'll just kind of get these like knowings. But it's not like a download of like a textbook of information, like specific things. Usually it's more just like feelings and knowings kind of.
And the tie-in, by the way, between meditation and raising consciousness that I've encountered in my researches is that, and it makes sense to me, that alien intelligences by and large are vibrating at a much faster rate. And it is literally very difficult for them to lower their vibrational rate slow enough to be able to interface with our brain neural nets, if you will. So that if we could just kind of meet them halfway,
Exactly.
we raise ours and they can lower theirs, and it gets to be approximately like the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, where, and I mean no disrespect to any Catholic or Christian, but you've got divine force reaching down and human reaching up, and not quite touching, but close enough that maybe some energy can transfer there.
Right, the higher and lower self, because the seals in our DNA have, created this separation. So we think it's extra, we think it's alien, and in a lot of ways, it's part of our multidimensional body and galactic heritage. We're in the personality matrix. Unless, I mean, like people like you are already in 5D and beyond, but you have to wake up in this lower density, right? So you help to raise the vibration. Other people are very much in the 3D because it's a personality matrix. It targets our self-worth from the time of childhood, telling us what it means to be successful, what we should strive to look like, and whatever programming we've been passed. And we structure our lives around that. And so it's a personality matrix. When we move into Ascension, it becomes soul, monad, universal mind. We start to see a much bigger picture. We recognize soulmates instead of people we just might have chemistry with who could be narcissistic and ruin our life. We're a little bit more tuned in and a little bit more connected. And so many of us are already like 5D and beyond. But as far as the collective density, the reason I think it's frustrating for a lot of us is because it still feels so heavy. It's like it's not moving quick enough. At least this is what I'm working with. It's just like trying to just ground and just be patient, because I've had to learn to come into my body where other people are learning to expand. I don't know, quite where I was. I'm not saying, oh, I've come in from the highest of realms, but grounding in this reality, we're not really grounding into the earth when there's the matrix overlay that we're asked to answer to. So to be able to connect the two, like you're saying, we have to master or release ourselves from that overlay that traps us in a like a spider web and wants to coil us up. Because nothing wrong with being super grounded to the earth. That is so key right now. But we have to bypass the matrix overlay, because the earth is going to help us to connect, create that connection. And then extraterrestrial is just going to be like, oh yeah, I remember being in that form. I remember being with that system or star system. I mean, it's obvious, just your energies, both of you. I mean, and a lot of people like you guys that I meet, it's like, starseed advanced souls that have come to raise a vibration. You're not in the human incarnational wheel in the same way, here to wake up. It's more like breaking through the amnesia and then being like, oh, there I am. And it seems like, you did it really early on, Gene. And I mean, same with you, Aaron.
Thank
I
you.
feel like I did too. I shouldn't have let it kick my ass so much. I should have been a little bit more.
I don't know. What about these kids? So Dolores Cannon talked about waves of star seeds, people from other planetary systems volunteering to come to Earth to help raise consciousness and mend fences, basically. So a generation came in the 1950s, and a generation came 20 years later, and a generation came 20 years after that. And that third generation is allegedly the indigo children. Okay. And we are seeing some very remarkable children. Am I right? Or am I right?
Oh,
Kids with amazing talents. Aaron.
Yeah. And that's why the schools, I mean, a lot of parents are saying, I'm going to homeschool. This isn't working, because advanced souls are very targeted, not appreciated.
And homeschoolers are being put on the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, suspected terrorist list, or so I have heard. You might be a terrorist if you homeschool. So what does that say about the truth?
Yeah.
And the vaccinations, just thinking that, little babies are targeted from the get-go. It's just so, yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of waves of advanced souls, but the great thing with advanced souls is there's no hierarchy. They're here to help switch on dormant DNA. They're not here to be like, we're the chosen ones and we're better, and that's why it's so obvious with, folks like you and, a lot of people that are in service. It's like, you're here to activate, not to be overlords. Like, whoa, it's like some people are just more awake. And they can help switch on the lights. It's like, here's a light. Here's a way to see yourself. Here's a way to get your brain firing in places that maybe it wasn't willing to go before. But it's inviting people to come and find themselves again. And there's a huge difference between that and somebody who's very egoic or guru centered and just wanting dependency from people, wanting to be elevated in a particular status that is just an old paradigm with different clothing and lingo.
Yeah.
Well said.
Well said. Yeah, you see that a lot.
With you guys, because I'm just like, I'm so happy this happened tonight. I couldn't have come at a better time. But anyway, sorry. What was that, Aaron?
I am just thrilled you're here.
No, yeah, that's what.
Aaron. We got a good thing going on here.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. This is amazing. Yeah, that's, you nailed it. And it's like, you get a lot of people in the spiritual or new age movement that they like to put on the persona that they're enlightened and everything, but then they're all ego and kind of like worship me kind of thing going on, where it's like, I have all the answers, I'm this big shot, and that, like Laura said, it's just, that's the old paradigm, just in new clothing, and that's what we're getting, that's what we're moving out of. And all those people are being exposed along with everything else. So it's like everything is being exposed right now, and that's what the energies coming in are doing. It's what this ascension is doing. We've been living in this like fake system. Fake is a good way I like to put it, because it's like it's all based on things that aren't really real. Like,
well, it's the illusion, the Maya.
Yeah, exactly.
Agree?
That's exactly.
That things appear to be solid, but they're actually collections of very rapidly moving atoms and molecules.
Yeah, exactly. And when like you have a world of a bunch of people putting their self-worth in things that made of material, like money or their status or whatever, and it's like, what is that even? That's not even real. That's just like a figment of your imagination, really. That no one can give you self-worth. You have it inherently, and you can't put a price on that. You can't put an amount on that, because we're all basically infinite. We're all the infinite creator experiencing itself, just at different points of experience.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's what like the Law of One talks about a lot.
We could talk all night probably, but
yes,
for the sake of expediency, let us start to wrap this up. So it's shout out time. Aaron, tell us about conferences you're going to be, projects you're involved in, publications, anything you want the viewers to know, and how to contact you, your website, stuff like that.
Sure, thank you. So I'll start with it. So I do a podcast called Journey to Truth Podcast, which I mentioned earlier, with my good friend Tyler Koala. You can find us on YouTube if you just search Journey to Truth or Journey to Truth Podcast, iTunes, a bunch of other platforms, Facebook, all the big social media. And Tyler and I will both be going to the ESETI conference, which should be 4th of July weekend, I believe. We're both definitely going to that. We're both going to be going to.
And where is that?
So that is in Trout Lake, Washington, which is where ESETI Ranch is. A guy named James Gilliland, if you don't know who he is amazing, and he runs that ranch. And he every year he does a big conference during 4th of July weekend, and then he'll do a bunch of like little workshops and conferences or little things throughout the year. So I'll be there. I'll be at Dimensions of Disclosure, which is a conference I've gone to every year for the 3 years so far it's gone on, but it's been at a different place, completely different location every year so far. And they haven't announced where it's going to be at this year. or when even. So it's been August every year so far. So I'm assuming it's going to be in August, but sometime. But I don't know yet because I haven't released those details. But for sure, I will be going to those two because those are my two favorite conferences. I like the smaller ones a lot better than like I went to Contact in the Desert a couple years ago and it was great, but not really my thing. But yeah.
Everybody needs to join your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, everyone subscribed.
And it's called?
It's called Journey to Truth Podcast. We have a different guest on every week, or we try to at least.
We've had fabulous luminaries such as Laura Eisenhower.
You guys have both been
and
on.
Gene Broida.
Yes. So Laura, you were on about a year ago, and Gene, you were on about a month ago. So
yeah.
Thank you guys both for coming on. You're both amazing.
Thank you. What about an email address? Do you want to share that with people?
Yeah. Well, I'll give the Journey to Truth. So we have Journey to Truth Podcast @gmail.com is our podcast email.
And are you looking for guests?
Yeah, we're always looking for guests. Or you can Facebook message us. A lot of people do that anyway. And a lot of the guests we've had on are just people that literally randomly Facebook messaged us and told kind of like, hey, I'm interested in coming on your show. And they told us a little about themselves and we checked them out and we're like, sure, yeah. So
all right.
If you just do that, we very well, can have you on the show. And
awesome.
We're open to pretty much everyone that, resonates with us and that we feel like is an awesome person with amazing information.
Truth is a great podcast. Journey to Truth, people. Laura, tell us about where you're at, where you're going, how to contact you if you want to be contacted.
Oh, thank you. You said if I wanted to be contacted?
Yeah, share as much as you care to.
Right. For contactee of all these people I just invited to my so I'm cosmicgaia.org. I have a podcast, Cosmic Gaia Podcast, and you can look at my website to see about subscriptions. It comes with a newsletter, mini sessions to help people navigate their chart, and podcast.
What you're doing on there is astrology?
Yes, so it's podcast, newsletters, and astrology. And I have a webinar coming up February 29th. You can find out information on my website. Like I said, cosmicgaia.org. It's with Portal to Ascension. February 29th, I believe it's in the afternoon times, I think 12 to 2 p.m., but you want to, double check that. And the minute you sign up, you'll get an email. It'll explain. And I'm actually offering short sessions, like 10, 15 minutes, little recordings for everybody that attends that I can email to you. So if you have a specific question or something comes up when you're listening to the webinar, I can give you a little bit of personal information about your own chart because our charts are very unique to us, of course. I have an event in Sedona, and that is going to be April 9th to 12th. And I will be doing readings there and a talk and it's called Sedona Vortex. Give me a second. It's called Beyond the Matrix, Sedona Vortex Event and Adventures. Andrew Collins, Suzanne Ross is the host. Brooks Agnew's going to be there. Brad Olson. If I name all the names of people at the events, that's going to take too much time. But I'll be at Contact in the Desert. I'll be speaking there. New Living Expo in San Mateo, California. Manchester, England at the end of June for an event, and I just have to get the name, and I'll be updating my website. But Awakening, it's always about awakening, right? Hold on a second. Yeah. So yeah, I know there's other things, but the soonest that you can check out my info is this webinar, and I really love this platform. Portal to Ascension are great, and I got a lot of cool information to share. So I'm excited to go to England. I've been waiting for an opportunity to go to England because I was born there. So I'm really excited to go to Manchester. And yeah, I know there's some other things, but yeah, Contact in the Desert, I've been speaking at since 2011. And yeah, it's a really big event, but it's going to be fun to see everybody. And we'll see what else comes down the road, but definitely check out my subscriptions if, people want like a weekly report of what's going on astrologically and to get to know yourself a little bit more through your chart. So.
Awesome. Actually, we did run into each other at the cafe bar at Contact in the Desert West last summer, but I don't actually expect you to remember that, Laura.
You're so familiar. No. It's like the minute I saw you, I'm like, oh, I know her.
There
Of
were
course I
people
know.
all
yeah.
around. It was
Yeah, but I must know you from a larger picture anyway. But
It's
no, you're very, yeah.
And you can find me online. I have my website, www.lightwork111.com. I write as Lightworker111 for thedailyconspiracy.com, dimwit.politics, and survival.update, several publications. I write as myself for thehealthedge.com. I've got this great new show, Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern on my new YouTube channel, Taboo Topics, also available from my website, tabootopics.life/shows. I've written a book, Unknown Objects, the top 10 U.S. UFO cases. Goes from the end of World War II up to the Phoenix Lights. Fascinating read. Hopefully not too hard, and you can find it on Amazon. And I got a press pass for the Human Origins Conference in Albuquerque.
Nice.
This is April 2nd through April 5th. And I'm very excited about this. I had Mrs. Smith of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that's Linda Smith, and he is Richard Smith. They are the organizers of Human Origins and dedicated UFO and human origins researchers. And the idea, of course, is that we humans have extraterrestrial origin as well as terrestrial origin. So there you have it. And I am always looking for guests for my show and to talk to people and write up stories. I invite you, please email me, Jean, Jean, at lightwork111.com. Any final thoughts, anybody here?
I've thoroughly enjoyed being with you guys. I didn't really know what to expect. I got invited not too long ago, and it was just like, boom! It's medicine to my soul right now. So I've really enjoyed being here. I want to thank everybody, for attending. I love your work, Aaron and Jean. I swear, you're just. I feel so the kindred thing, like you said, and I really look forward to checking out your books and everything that you're about and getting to know you more. So yeah,
Ditto. I see a long-term beneficial positivity experience and relationship out of all this. And, what's cool is that the family of paranormalists, no matter what your discipline or focus is, we're all connected like any family. And we don't have to have daily phone calls, although we might. But what you were talking about, going to contact in the desert or any of these events where you go a few years time and again, and you do run into people in the community and you do see your old friends and acquaintances. And I know your name, it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't quite place it. So it's a real joy to find people who share our beliefs and don't challenge our value systems, and we don't have to be on the defensive all the time.
Yes.
I'm just so grateful to have superb guest panelists on my show, such as yourselves. Laura Eisenhower, thank you so much. You're such a bright light. Aaron Kuhn, you're a rising star. I love you both so much.
I love you guys.
Love you
and that's
both.
our take on it. Thanks everyone for listening into Taboo Topics with Jean Broida at tabootopics.life/shows. See you next week. Over and out.
Dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists. and will persist.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment.